I've just started the live stream.
Good evening. It's 6:30 and I'll begin this meeting of the Executive of Bedford Borough Council. The first item is item 1, and I have a question of the Chief Executive. I think you'll all be aware that former Councillor Ian Clifton, former Deputy Mayor of this borough and an honorary alderman, passed away early this month. In fact, his funeral was today. I wonder if from the executive, we could ask the Chief Executive to send a letter to his family of our condolences and thanks for all the services he contributed by being a councillor for Risey for so many years. And I'm sure we'd all support that letter. He served for a long time, served on the executive when we were at district council functions, and then saw us through to unitary status. So I would like to send his family our thoughts and prayers and thanks for all the work he did. And it's strange times that we live in, because I would normally have been at the funeral today to pay my respects to the family, but of course that wasn't possible. I hope you all agree that we should do that, and that was unanimous. I'm seeing lots of people.
Yes, thank you. Great. Thank you.
Chief Executive, can you get that carried out as soon as possible, please?
I certainly can, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any other questions? If not, can we move on to item 2 on the agenda to receive any apologies for absence? Are there any apologies for absence?
None have been received, Chair.
Thank you, and I believe everybody's here. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting. To confirm the minutes of the meeting of the executive held on the 28th of October 2020. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I'm seeing nods around the table or screen. Item 4, disclosure of local and/or disclosure of pecuniary interests. Members are reminded that where they have a local and/or disclosure of pecuniary interest in any business of the council to be considered at this meeting, they must disclose the existence and nature of that interest at the commencement of that consideration, or when the interest become apparent in accordance with the council's code of conduct. Do any members have such interests? Thank you. I'll take it if there are none then. Item 5 is reference from council or overruled scrutiny committee. Are there any, Chief Exec?
There are none, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 6 is the minimum energy efficiency standards in private rented homes. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you. Well, this proposed policy is good news. Well, at least it's good news for tenants in privately rented accommodation, but it's bad news for any landlord who provides substandard domestic rented properties. So the council is responsible for enforcing various parts of the legislation, and this ensures that the standards in properties are maintained in the private rented sector, and that landlords must only issue tenancies that comply with the law, and that's to be from the start of the tenancy. Landlords should provide energy efficient properties with a minimum rating of E or above. This is applicable to all relevant tenancies, and whether that is assured or regulated or domestic agriculture. Where the property is substandard, landlords must make energy efficient improvements which raise the EPC rating to a minimum of E. And for those of you that don't know, the EPC stands for Energy Performance Certificates. The Energy Efficiency Regulations 2015 deal with the substandard domestic rented properties, and specifically tackling the least energy efficient that those with the EPC, and that is those EPCs with the ratings of F and G. So the council is responsible for enforcing these regulations, and where it is satisfied that a property has been let in breach of the regulations, it may serve a penalty notice on the landlord, and that will carry a financial penalty. The council has the discretion, though, to decide the amount of financial penalty up to a maximum limited that is set by the regulations. The proposed policy that we're seeking tonight is set out in Appendix A, and this includes a matrix which is used to calculate the amount of penalty. One thing that's important to note, though, is this is talking about private rented accommodation from landlords, and it does not apply to registered providers of social housing. So just to let you know, it's the council's housing and pollution team and the trading standards team that undertake the enforcement of these legal requirements. And just for information, there is a virtual landlords forum on Wednesday, the 9th of December at 6:30, where this will be, if we pass it tonight, this will be on the agenda. So I hope the executive will agree the 3 recommendations.
Are there any questions? Councillor McMurdo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Atkins, you said from the start of the tenancy, I've had to read from that there's no backtracking. So if somebody's already in tenancy, it wouldn't apply to that. Is that correct?
No, at the moment we think that it's estimated that there's probably over 1,000 plus accommodation that is in the lower standards, under the minimum standards. So, but if they are letting it, that they must let it from the start. So they will be required, any that is found, reported, or that the team discovers, that they will then need to bring it up to the standard.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And
No, sorry, comment.
Councillor McMurdo, we'll move to comments. Councillor McMurdo.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's bad news for those that are renting these sort of substandard quality houses. I think it's a well-deserved situation that's arising. So I really do welcome this, and look forward to some of the tenants who are often some of the most vulnerable in our communities. So yeah, I really support this and commend it. So thank you, Councillor Atkins.
I did say it was good news for tenants and bad news for the landlords.
Yes.
No, sorry, I understood that, but I don't think it's bad news for them because they're behaving badly. I just think it's the right and proper news for them. It's a wake-up call.
And if I make a note, clearly there are some very good landlords around, and landlords that do actually look after properties and look after energy efficiency ratings. I think it's exceptionally good news. I'll be voting for it. We're not asking, it's only the lowest 2 levels that we're asking for. So it's not sort of gold-plated standard of heating. It's just removing the worst. And I think not only does it help the tenants and help many of those that are actually in fuel poverty, it obviously helps the climate that we live in, and the climate emergency we declared, by actually reducing some of those that have the worst excesses. So I think it's a really good news, and shows our commitment not only to those people that are having to pay that amount, but also to the climate itself. So I welcome this report and the recommendations. Are there any other comments? The recommendations are set out in item 2. Are they agreed?
Absolutely agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I've got nods around the screen, and lots of people said thank you very much. Don't see anybody disagreeing, so thank you. We now move on to item 7, the Public Spaces Protection Order, PSPO, for Town Centre area street drinking. Councillor Atkins.
Yep, this is another good news, I hope, and we'll get full support. What it does is it provides the proposal is for a new Public Spaces Protection Order, a PSPO, in the town centre area to tackle street drinking and related antisocial behaviour. Now, as councillors, we are all aware of the concerns raised about street drinking in the town centre and in parts of Harper and De Paris and in other parts of Castlewood. However, this report isn't because of our views. It is borne out by the evidence gathered from the public consultations that were held last year in 2019 and this year in 2020. On top of that, there's also the recorded data from the police, which shows that alcohol-related antisocial behaviour and the public's perceptions of street drinking, it identifies that street drinking has a detrimental impact on the quality of life. And if you're looking at the reports, that's on page 77. So these negative impacts of alcohol and street drinking are rated highly in the consultations that took place. And 90.9% of respondents to the latest consultation agreed or strongly agreed to the proposals to introduce a PSPO. And the comments made on that consultation is on page 7.8. So the PSPO, what it'll bring is it'll bring a legal approach which will be consistent with the current legislation, and it will permit enforcement and support the activities to be undertaken in a targeted manner in line with the legislation and guidance. It will also form part of a toolkit which is available to assist with cases and individuals who require alternative interventions regarding their lifestyle, with their lifestyle choices. So I know that one of the concerns is who is going to enforce this and implement it. Well, there are two good letters there that in the report that are from the Chief Superintendent John Murphy, who is head of local policing, and he's also chair of the Community Safety Partnership. And within that, he details the support for the PSPO, and also that there will be varying degrees that the partnership should be using to help the individuals with their lifestyles and associated effects, and also looking at the actual enforcement by the police. And this will be mainly done by things that have been successful in the past that we've worked on, which is days of action and other partnership activities. So the order, as well as the actual town centre, but it's also during the day. It will also help with the nighttime economy. It will help with licensing objectives, the community safety plan, and also Bedford Bid. So the proposed order runs from in about just over 2 weeks' time, 16th of December this year to December 2023. But what it can do is it can undergo a review during that 3-year period if things change and local situations change and different areas are identified. So yeah, it's we've got the recommendation, and I hope that you'll support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Atkins. Are there any questions? Are there any questions or comment, Councillor Van?
It's a comment, Mr. Mayor, if that's all right. Obviously, I'd like to thank Councillor Atkins for bringing this forward and for highlighting the letter from the police as well and from Chief Superintendent Murphy, because I think that is critical to the success of this, is the enforcement that follows, as you say. But this is clearly a good move and good news in relation to one of the #1 things I hear from town centre businesses as well. You made mention of this, but as a councillor for De Paris ward, and why that's not necessarily entirely relevant on the executive front, it is obviously a regular and an issue that affects St Peter's Green and the top end of the high streets, as well as the town centre as a whole. And so I'm really pleased that this has been brought forward and that it is coming with, we hope, effective enforcement and enables quicker action to be taken. So I will be supporting this evening. And thank you very much, Councillor Atkins, for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Are there any other any other comments? The recommendations are set out in 2. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much. And I have nods around the rest of the screen. So thank you. That is agreed. And we now move on to item 8, which is the risk management arrangements review of strategic risks. Councillor Headley.
Thank you. This is our annual review of the strategic and corporate risks. This time includes an update to our COVID-19 risk register that we looked at earlier in the year. We've already reviewed this strategy in June, so today it's actually just the registers themselves that we are looking at and being asked to consider. I think it's very important that we identify the risks that we face as an authority, and then we put in place appropriate controls around those risks, and that's what this process does. It's not about having a document, it's about having identified the risks and then taking actions, appropriate controls in regard to those risks, and that's what you'll see set out in the pages of the report. These have been fully reviewed for us to consider today, so I'm happy to propose the recommendation as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? No, I thought either Councillor Murdo or myself might have a comment, having sat through a risks seminar this afternoon for the IDB, but clearly this meets with that training session we had this afternoon.
Indeed, Mr. Mayor, I was refraining.
Thank you very much. In which case, the recommendations are set out in item 2. Do we agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. If we can now move on to item 9, the review of the special area charges for 2021-22. Councillor Headley.
Thank you. This is the review we do every 5 years of special area charges. Having done that review, the outcome is a recommendation to continue to include parks and open spaces and community centres within special area charges. These costs will then be split between the Bedford and Parish area, Kempston, Brickhill and the rural area, as you see set out in the report. Important to note that the figures in this report are based on the current year's budget. The final figures for next year will come out through the budget process, and we'll see them in the new year. But these are the indicative figures based on the approach having gone through this review. I move the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor McMurdo.
Yeah, just maybe a prompt rather than a question for Councillor Headley. Of course, this is an independent review carried out by CITFA. Is that correct, Councillor Headley?
That's right. Every 5 years we get an independent look at this. Clearly, we review the figures every year in relation to the budgets that come up every year. But we have an independent review, and that's it in the paperwork that you've got. There's an independent review carried out. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question and the clarification. Are there any other questions or comments?
Perhaps Mr. Mayor, Councillor Headley could just explain for the residents in Brickhill. Sometimes they get their form through and it says your council tax is so much for the borough and so much for the parish council. That amount for the borough is reduced compared to other people. So it's not that the Brickhill bid is all on top of what everyone else pays. Special area charges are quite hard for people to understand, I think, sometimes. But that's so they pay less and then they pay the bit for Brickhill.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think all parish with areas with town and parish councils, it's important for people to understand that, because obviously they have a separate bill for their town and parish council. And I think it's not necessarily widely understood that the amount they pay to the borough council is reduced before they then pay the parish precept. So yes, that's your explanation is totally correct. That these things that we've just talked about, the parks and the community centres, they're basically taken off the budget for everybody, and then they're reallocated to the areas that they're relevant to, and only those areas pay for them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Again, thank you for the clarification. I do think it's one of the most difficult things to get head round, but once you have it, does seem very simple. In which case, there are no other questions and no comments. Can we agree with recommendations as set out in item 2?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you very much. Nods around the table and people saying agreeing, which is always helpful. And we then move on to item 10, the 2020-2021 revenue trends. Councillor Headley.
Thank you. With the impact of COVID-19, we continue to monitor the council's budgets very closely, and we do that usually, as you know, as you receive these regular reports. But it's particularly important this year to continue to do that as thoroughly as we always do. The latest overall forecast in this report is an overspend of £2.75 million. Although there is further government grant that was received after the 30th of September date that these figures relate to. This report reflects that half year up to the end of September with a forecast for the remaining half of the financial year. And the point that I keep stressing is there's a lot more uncertainty this year than there is normally, so that the forecast for the rest of this half year, it's just that it's a forecast, but things can change and could change depending on how the rest of the year unfolds, particularly around the virus, COVID-19, its impact and any knock-on impact on the economy. They can all feed through into our budget figures, our spend figures in the current year. There's a proposal in this report to reallocate a further £2 million from adult social care to children's social care, and this is where the pressures are being felt this year. Regarding adult social care, I think it's important that I remind you that we added an extra £4.2 million to adult social care in the current year's budget. So it's not that the costs are falling in adult social care, it's just that they're not rising as much as we budgeted for, allowing that the funding there to be available and used for children's social care. And also stress that this doesn't include the extra specific COVID-19 costs relating to adult social care, which are picked up through the COVID-19 cost area. And that's on top of what you see in terms of the adult social care figures in this report. So I move the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? Councillor Jackson.
Just a brief comment, really. I think this is an extremely difficult job to do because we really don't know what the impact of COVID is going to be across all these areas. We can only have a best guess at it. It's going to be very, very difficult for the next few months, I think. I mean, there's an excellent department there working through all of these issues with your good self, and I can't imagine it's very easy. But yeah, tough times ahead, I suspect.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? I think just to reiterate from me Councillor Jackson's point about very difficult times, and I'm sure people are slaving over some hot statements from today's Chancellor's comprehensive spending review, and as normal we'll get lots of stuff over the following days, weeks and possibly months in terms of the output from that. And of course none of that is reflected in this, as Councillor Headley said. This takes us to the end of September figures. That in mind, thanks all the officers for all the reports, for all the work, but I know finance is just constantly moving at the moment. The recommendations are set out in item 2. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed.
In which case, thank you all very much, and that ends this meeting of the executive. Appreciate your